Kelly Vaughn, and welcome to Inside Indy. And today on Inside Indy, we're going to be talking about the homicide rate in Indianapolis, which I believe is at the 100 mark, maybe even beyond that. And just recently, and of course this is several weeks from the time that we actually taped this interview, but just last night alone, and what is today's date? This is the 12th, so the 11th, 3 homicides, a 17-year-old, 14-year-old, and a 19-year-old killed on the streets of Indianapolis. And here in the studio with me this evening to talk about it, causes, solutions perhaps, we have Pastor Jeffrey Johnson II of Eastern Star Church here in Indianapolis. Welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me.
And Lloyd Sprowl, who is with Sprowl Funeral and Cremation and the Marion County Coroner's Office.
Yes.
Well, welcome.
Thank you.
To Inside Indy.
Thank you.
I asked the two of you to come in because, first of all, Pastor Jay gave a phenomenal sermon last Sunday on this very issue about our boys dying in the streets. And then I know you, Lloyd, deal firsthand. I mean, you see things that most of us will never see, don't want to see, but you are right there in the trenches of it all. And so I wanted to come in and get your perspectives on this, and you've been seeing it for some time over the years, and perhaps offer some solutions. So let me start with Pastor Jay and your message on Sunday.
Sure.
Could you kind of give us the highlights of it and what you wanted the congregation to derive from that?
Yeah, it's interesting because Sunday I wanted to do a whole different sermon. I called it, I wanted to do a little cute sermon is what I called it.
Cute sermon, okay.
But then the weekend before I preached, there were 2 incidents where 2 teenagers died. Brother and sister died, 2 teenagers. And then there was a story that came out that a 3-month-old baby died right next to his uncle who also died, all by gun violence in our city. So that was a tough week to experience, just kind of dealing with some of the grief in our city. And the weekend that I preached, Friday was the funeral of the 3-month-old and the uncle. So there was 2 caskets in front of the pulpit of Friendship Baptist Church on the west side of Indianapolis. Then Saturday, on the east side of Indianapolis at Mount Carmel, there were 2 caskets, one of a 15-year-old, one of a 14-year-old. And so I just felt like this has to be addressed. And I felt God was really, tugging on my heart to kind of address this. And so I wanted the congregation to know kind of the magnitude of the issues that we face in our city. So I looked at a scripture out of Exodus chapter 1, where King Pharaoh asked the citizens in Egypt to kill the Hebrew boys. And I looked at that text and just found, just talked about the realities of spiritual warfare, social systems, political systems that are involved in destroying our communities by destroying our baby boys specifically. And then I looked at the role of the community, people that may not have any children but love other children like it's their own, like they're their own children. And then I looked at the role of the parents who do have children and ways in which we can create something of substance in the home that we can put our child in so that they can be protected and covered from the evils of this world. And so I knew that it would be kind of a touchy topic to touch on a Sunday morning. But the response that I got from people was very encouraging. And now the talk now is what can we do with sermons like that? Like, I know I'm not the only preacher to, touch on the homicides and just the ills of our nation and our society and communities. So the question is, how do we take this information and make it live beyond the pulpit, live beyond the church, so that we can really see a change in our community, city, and nation?
Okay.
Yeah.
I want to identify the victims that you spoke of. And actually, I don't have their names right here, but it was a 16-year-old boy and 15-year-old sister were shot to death at an apartment complex on the northeast side of Indy. They were called to 4100 Wind Hill Drive. It was 7:30 in the morning. reports of a person shot. So in that particular scenario, and again, I know we all get bits and pieces of information, but it was a transaction of a cell phone that the kids were buying from the assailant. I think yeah.
I think so. And then the mom actually of the one that was pulling the trigger ended up turning her son in.
Okay.
And that's how they found out,
Right.
you know, who the person, the
And
shooter
did we ever
was.
find out what the motive was with the young boy?
I don't
What
believe
did you all think? What did you think, Lloyd, when you heard that story? Because oftentimes you see the aftermath, but what's leading up to that?
Well, when you hear that a teenager has taken another, teenager or two life over a cell phone, it makes me wonder what the thought process is with that individual.
Right.
What brings them to the point that they want to take someone's life over something as simple as a cell phone, something that's easily accessible, in the community, and you can purchase it for little or nothing or what have you. So what drives a person to want to take someone's life over something so small and ultimately throw their life away? Not only have they taken 2 lives, but they're going to lose their life to the system, to the penal system. So it doesn't make sense. And there's more than, it's just going to take a community to talk and to gather more information from these young children. And really not so much the kids who are not having issues. I believe we need to strike at the kids who are known as troubled children to kind of dig deeper into what their thought process may be.
Yeah, you hit it on the nail, the thought process. Do you have any thoughts on that, Pastor Jay, in terms of, because I know that's what I thought, like, what was he thinking? Why would you do that?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a lot of things, and we can always revert to like the role that media plays in the development of the mind of our children, the music that they listen to, the things they see on social media, the movies, the video games, all these things. And then you mix that with just kind of some of the peer pressure and the things that are going on in our schools. And then the fact that how did this teenager even have access to a weapon, right? So now we're talking about things that may be related to his home environment and his family. And so I feel like it's a lot of things that kind of go into that situation and getting them and him getting even to that situation and taking the life of somebody. I think all that gets into
So
play.
do you think he knew, and I know you don't know, but again, we're just kind of tossing thoughts and ideas around it to try to come up with some kind of solutions. Do you think he didn't understand what he was doing? You mentioned video games. Is it like, in his mind, like it's a game? And this is like you get a second chance? Like, I'm not, and why don't consequences steer you away from that?
It could be a mixture of fear when he's in the act of doing what he's doing. So not only does one individual see that he is robbing another individual, now we have 2 players. And that thought process of, and movies could play a role in that, as far as watching movies where make sure you leave no witnesses. And that thought could come to mind. And then not understanding that forensics, plays a role in catching, a prime suspect.
Okay,
And
we all watch Forensic Files. Okay, they don't watch that. I don't get it.
it's very
It's like,
possible they do not.
I mean, you got the whole DNA thing. I mean, now
Right.
you
Right.
just wonder, like, he's walking out of the building. First of all, you got a phone that has a camera on it. That's the first thing. Okay, so if you got a camera with you all the time, the building's probably got a camera. So you would just think of this day and age, a lot of crime would decrease just because it's so easy to figure it out now.
Yeah.
So why doesn't, and what's in the heart of men and women that don't, what's going on there that you don't measure the consequences and you're just...
It's tough because, I had an opportunity to make remarks at the funeral of the 3-month-old baby and the uncle that died from gun violence. And I was transparent with the people. I was just like, man, I'm upset about this. I've really upset and mad at God. And sometimes people would like to wrongly say that all this is a part of the will of God. And I don't think that for a second. I really believe, and of course God created us to have free will. So you have free will, and then there's some things that we just have to conclude that it's just stupidity at the end of the day. Like there's no logic behind why somebody would take another person's life over a cell phone, right? And so at the end of the day, I think that could be chalked up to not having the knowledge, stupidity, just having negative influences around him, not having, a mentor, not having anybody in his life to redirect him. And so all these things go into play, but at the end of the day, it was his decision to make to pull that trigger.
Absolutely.
Should he be tried as an adult or a child?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I having 4 children myself and watching them progress through life, the different stages of age, children nowadays are maturing at an early age. So it's not that they do not know. You can get a 10-year-old. I believe they know the difference between taking someone's life or not taking someone's life. Then you get to the age of 15. You have your friends. You're watching television. They are aware of, murders and homicides and the potential effects. They just don't place themselves in the judicial system to where that penalty is going to affect them greatly for the choice they just made. So it could be a lack of maturity on that individual's part, but I do not believe that these children are not aware of right and wrong.
Okay. We're going to take a break, and we'll come back. We're going to talk more about the case the funeral that you was that Ivory, the assailant in that is Ivory Smith, the uncle, and then was it a nephew?
It was actually Kador Wilson.
Okay.
And William Wilson.
Okay, and then the assailant is Ivory Smith.
I believe so.
Right.
Yes.
Okay, we're going to talk more about that particular case because Lloyd actually handled the fundraising and the services for that family.
Right.
Okay, when we come back.
So we were walking to school.
I started thinking about lunch. Mom packed me turkey and cheese.
She's
I really want
smart.
cheese pizza.
Sometimes her mind wanders.
We should have a sleepover.
I remember saying, Laura?
I think I heard Mom say something.
The sign says don't walk.
Sometimes it's so overwhelming.
I really hope she doesn't
I
have
really
another
hope I
bad
don't
day
have
at
another
school
bad day at
today.
school today.
When you can see learning and attention issues from their side, you can be on their side. Go to understood.org, a free online resource with support and tools to help your child thrive.
Because of you, I feel not alone in this world. And you let me know that it only takes one person to make you feel wanted.
When I was your age, I was just like you, fascinated by stars. But now I get to search for life in the universe. And who knows, maybe life is looking for us too.
So we're like aliens to them?
Yeah. Does anyone want to be a scientist now?
I do.
Awesome. We need more girls in STEM.
Maybe we can find aliens.
And we're back here on Inside Indy, and we're talking about the homicides in our city, possible the causes and solutions. And we're talking to Pastor Jay of Eastern Star Church and Lloyd Sprowl, who is with Sprowl Funeral and Cremation, which is on West 30th Street?
Yes, it is.
Right, okay, just
Yes.
west of Dr. King
Clifton.
Street. Okay, very gorgeous facility, by the way.
Thank you.
Absolutely gorgeous. We were talking about the homicide involving William Wilson, who had an argument with his girlfriend, or his fiancée, Ivory Smith, who's 36 years old, and Mr. Wilson, and then a baby perished as a result of that. particular case. This one was a little bit different. I think there may have been alcohol involved, at least earlier the night before. But any thoughts on that particular case? And because I know, Lloyd, your funeral home handled some of the fundraising for the services there.
Yes, yes. What I take from tragic circumstances like that one, the emotional toll that it takes on the family, first responders, the last responders, the funeral industry, the funeral homes that have to, work with families that have suffered such a tragic loss, the emotional strain and financial strain. Not just one loved one has died. Now you're dealing with two, and the financial burden that is placed upon these families. But first and foremost, the emotional strain of everyone involved, not just the family, but law enforcement, EMS, coroners, the funeral staff, and then the person that most people don't see at a funeral home, the embalmer, who has to take these loved ones into their care, and they have to deal with the devastation as a result of this violent act. And it's great. It's great. So even the ministers, though, I mean, yes, ministers, this is what they do. They preach day in and day out. But this is not normal. I mean, a 3-month-old, even the adult William, it is still not normal. It's just tragic. Yeah. So the emotional toll that it takes on everyone, that would be the main thing that I take from situations like this.
Yeah.
Yeah, I kind of want to jump in what he said. He said it's not normal, and I think in this city, in this country, we've been immune to tragic situations. We've been immune to mass shootings. We've been immune to children dying in the streets, and that's one of my goals to preach that sermon was to help people see the magnitude of the issue, where the state of Indiana is number 5 in homicides, where black people make up 13% of the population in this nation, but 87% of the homicides. In the state of Indiana, over the past 3 years, at 2 of the past 3 years, over 100 black men have died because of gun violence. So when you look at the numbers and just see the magnitude of the situation, and when you hear stories like this, tragic stories, at some point we, as a city, as a community, we got to begin to not just cry out, but then put some practical things involved to help protect our children from society's ills.
Why do you suppose it is so high in the African American community? Any theories?
Why homicide is so high in our community? Well,
You said it's another show, huh? I can see. He's saying I'm giving away his next Sunday's sermon.
Quick to anger.
Yeah.
Quick to anger. Young guys, the testosterone is flowing, and they're just easily, it's just anger comes easy to young kids nowadays, and it's not about fighting. They want blood. They want someone's life. And it could be the lack of a father figure at home. So it's not just a father, but you also have to include, are there uncles that can help these children out? Are there grandfathers that can help these young men out? But getting in there and as a family member, trying to take note on a young man. Is he a quick to anger young man? Because if he is, maybe this is something we need to dig into to hopefully prevent future outbursts and violence in his life. So more or less keeping an eye on our young men, watching them closely. Are they easily angered? Because when you have that, you have it's a dangerous
How to handle your emotions.
Yes.
And a lot of that you're taught when you're a little kid. I can remember my mother sitting on the side of the bed when I was 5, and she said, "Now you don't ever kill yourself." And because you don't know that at 5 that you don't. And so if somebody's not telling you when you're little, I just think like sometimes the stuff I've been through in life, like could I have done that? But that 5, once that's kind of in my brain, it's like no matter what happens, you don't do that. Yeah. So, and then you wonder if somebody maybe who took their lives, obviously there's things like depression, but maybe nobody told them that, and so you're told at a very young age. Yeah. Were you going to add to that?
Yeah, I think, when we talk about homicides, yes, I believe personal choice for sure, and the different, family environments and anger. But also I think we have to take into consideration we live in America, and there are certain systems at play that are designed to destroy the African American community. And this is not something that is new. There's been a history of this in our nation, and I'll bring up the fact in 2017 when Trayvon Martin got killed, and up until today, up until now, I feel like the killing of black males have gone viral, and not just at the hands of the police, but at our own hands as well. And then even before that, 20 years after slavery, they began to record lynchings in America, and the ones that they recorded counted up to 4,700. Majority of them are black males from 1880 until 1960, 4,700 lynchings. And then before that, of course, slavery, where they were destroying the black males, destroying the black family. And so I believe there is a system that is at work and at play, political, social, spiritual warfare. And in addition to just personal choice and family environment and the different emotions that we have, which should challenge us and empower us as a community to say, it's not just up to, a mom and a dad to take care of their child. This is a community responsibility. It takes a village to raise one. It takes a village to save a child as well.
It's interesting you were talking about that, like those things can be systemic, but also historically how they can affect future generations. And a lot of people think, well, that was slavery, that's back then, that's over with. But if we were to look at sexual abuse, say, and how that's, if you have someone who's a sexual abuser, that probably stemmed from somebody back in 1642. That was passed down and passed down. Sometimes it is repeated, sometimes not. But when we look at sexual abuse or child abuse or somebody, the tendency to hit it, because the person who's hit tends to pass that down. So if you go back to when slaves were enslaved and the level of abuse that they took, it's like way over the top of what most people would experience even in their homes, unless you obviously were killed. But then that's passed down to the next generation, to the next. The tendency to do that, sometimes it's not, but somehow we don't see that. But we see it in other things medically, that things have been passed down generationally. It's like, oh yeah, that happens. You say slavery. Oh no, that was over with. No, it's because you wanted to be over with. And so
there's a book that's out called Post-Traumatic Slave Syndrome. I forgot the writer, the person who wrote the book, but she talks about that very thing, how traumatic slavery was, the suppression of our humanity, rape, lynchings, hanging, all these things, and the trauma of that, emotional, mental, spiritual trauma of that passed on generation to generation. And we can see the effects of that today. And
how much of that is genetic? Somebody was telling me that they did a study where they had mice, and the mice were female and they were pregnant, and they would beat them. And then every time they would beat them, they'd ring a bell and the thing would run. And when she had babies, they would just ring the bell and the babies would run, though they didn't beat the babies. So you just wonder how much of that, we don't think of things like that, being beaten down, being passed on through genetically.
Right.
But who's to say? It just makes you wonder. And you can consider the horrors of slavery, that it wouldn't be surprising that whether it's that tendency or whatever came from that. Also lack of opportunity. I think that people just get very frustrated. I know I get mad when I don't have anything to eat. And I know it might just be for an hour. I get a real bad attitude.
Exactly. So I think all that is in play. Food deserts, economic deserts, not having jobs, not knowing when your next meal coming from. All that is in play.
And also being mistreated in the sense that people are always suspicious. And this isn't just black men, it happens to black women. I can go somewhere and you can just tell I'm being watched. Or I'm treated a certain way until they find out, oh, you're the girl from media or something. I guess something different. But it's happened You know, when you're not necessarily in an urban area, you get it a lot. And then people don't believe you, like, oh, girl, nobody. Yeah, really, they are doing that. Yeah, they are doing that. So you mentioned earlier about parents, and I think we just got a couple of minutes left. But how much do you think they play a role in this, especially when it comes, you mentioned earlier about fathers not being there.
Yeah.
What is that about? And why are they not?
I just believe you have a system of young girls who are becoming impregnated at young ages. Yeah. You know, I'm seeing them at age 14, 15. So now this child is going to raise a child. Mm-hmm. And if she doesn't have a good family support system, then that effect is just passed down to that child she is just birthed. And it's just, like you said, sometimes it could be genetics. It just keeps going down the line and down the line. And
history repeats itself.
so, but we can't put everything off on the family system, though, because I have encountered many families that are functioning, wonderfully functioning families, but they have that one child that strays, and there's no rhyme or reason why this child is strayed. Right. And it comes down to choice. A decision this child has made.
Pastor Jay, we got just about 30 seconds.
Yeah, I definitely think the role of the parents is definitely important, but I also think the role of the community to help. There are people that don't have children, that didn't give birth to children, but still have a heart for children, and I think as a role as a community to come alongside those families who may need that extra support to make sure that our children are saved.
Okay. Yeah. Okay, very good. Well, thank you for coming in and having this discussion. Maybe we'll have to do this again. Get a little roundtable thing going. Part two. Yeah, we just the tip of the iceberg there. Pastor Jay of Eastern Star Church. Thank you so much. And Lloyd Sprowl of Sprowl Funeral and Cremation. Thank you so much both for joining us on Inside Indy.
Thank you.
And thank you for joining us. I'm Kelly Vaughn. We'll see you next time. Bye-bye.
I don't remember how it started.
Go to that.
Our back and forth. It always came back. Dad! You probably don't remember what you told me.
That was perfect.
But I heard every word.